Don't come to Dad's funeral. My sister texted family only. You're not welcome. I was driving to the airport when I received it. I pulled over and called the funeral home. This is Miss Carter, owner of Peaceful Meadows Cemetery. Cancel the Morrison service. Their $15,000 deposit. Gone. The text came through at 6:47 a.m. while I was merging onto the highway toward LAX. My phone sat in the cup holder, screen glowing with that particular shade of blue that signals a message you know will ruin your day. I glanced down at a red light and saw my sister Bethany's name, followed by words that made my hands grip the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Don't come to Dad's funeral. Family only. You're not welcome. I pulled into a gas station parking lot, my rental car's engine still running as I stared at those words. 23 years. That's how long I've been the family scapegoat. The disappointment. The one who abandoned everyone by moving to California and building a life that didn't revolve around their toxic dysfunction. But this? Banning me from my own father's funeral? My father had died 3 days ago from a heart attack. I'd gotten a call from my younger brother, Marcus, who'd at least had the decency to inform me. Dad's gone, he'd said, his voice flat. Funeral Saturday at Peaceful Meadows. No emotion, no details, just the bare minimum. That should have been my first warning. I'd immediately booked a flight from Los Angeles to Richmond, Virginia, rearranged my entire work schedule, and prepared myself for the emotional warfare that always accompanied family gatherings. But I'd never imagined they'd actually try to exclude me entirely. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Bethany. Mom agrees. You made your choice when you left. Don't bother showing up. Something cold and sharp crystallized in my chest. I'd spent 2 decades trying to maintain some connection to these people, sending Christmas cards that went unacknowledged, making phone calls that were answered with guilt trips and accusations. I'd flown back for Mom's birthday last year and been treated like an inconvenient stranger who'd crashed their party. Every attempt at reconciliation was met with a laundry list of my supposed failures. But here's what Bethany didn't know. I wasn't just Megan Morrison anymore. I was Megan Carter now, married to Daniel Carter for 8 years. And Daniel's family owned Peaceful Meadows Cemetery, one of the most prestigious funeral homes and burial grounds in Central Virginia. When Daniel's mother, Patricia, had retired last year, she transferred ownership to both of us. Technically, the paperwork listed me as primary owner for tax purposes. I sat in that parking lot for 10 minutes, watching early morning commuters pump gas and grab coffee, living their normal lives while mine was imploding. My mind raced through every family gathering, every holiday, every moment, where I'd been made to feel like an outsider in my own family. There was the Christmas when I was 25, freshly graduated from UCLA with my business degree. I'd flown home with gifts for everyone, excited to share stories about my new job at a marketing firm. My mother had opened her present, an expensive cashmere scarf I'd saved for, looked at it, and said, "Must be nice to have money to waste on fancy things." Bethany had laughed, adding, "Some of us have real responsibilities, Megan. We can't all play career woman in California." I remembered my college graduation. I'd invited them all, sent them the date months in advance. None of them came. Dad said he couldn't get time off work. Mom said it was too expensive. Bethany claimed she had a dental conference, though I later found out through a mutual friend that she'd actually gone to Virginia Beach that weekend with her husband. Marcus was only 16 then, so he didn't have a choice. But he told me years later that Mom had forbidden him from asking to go. The memories flooded back. My 21st birthday, which I'd spent alone in my dorm room because going home meant listening to lectures about how college was changing me, making me think I was better than everyone else. The time I'd been hospitalized with appendicitis during my junior year, and nobody had made the trip across the country to see me. When I called home, crying, scared, and alone, my mother had sighed and said, "Megan, you're an adult now. You can't expect us to drop everything every time you have a problem." But when Bethany had her first baby, I was expected to fly home immediately. When Marcus got married, I was guilted into paying for the rehearsal dinner because you're the one with all the money. When Dad's car broke down, somehow it became my responsibility to send money for repairs because family helps family. The help only flowed one direction, from me to them, never the reverse. I thought about Daniel's family, how different they were. When we'd gotten engaged, his parents had thrown us an engagement party and invited 50 people. His mother had cried happy tears and told me she was gaining a daughter. When we got married, Patricia had insisted on paying for half the wedding, even though she knew my family wasn't contributing anything. "You're family now," she had said simply. The Carters had shown me what real family looked like. They celebrated my achievements instead of diminishing them. They asked about my work because they were genuinely interested, not because they wanted to find ways to criticize. When I'd mentioned wanting to get my MBA, Patricia had encouraged me, offered to help with tuition if I needed it. My own mother's response to the same news had been, "War school? When are you going to settle down and have kids like a normal person?" I pulled out my phone again and reread Bethany's message. "Family only. You're not welcome." The words burned. After everything I'd endured, every insult I'd swallowed, every boundary violation I'd tolerated, they were officially disowning me from even the most basic family obligation, mourning our father. Something shifted inside me. A door that had been slowly closing for years finally slammed shut. Then I made a decision. I called the funeral home. Jerry, our senior coordinator, answered on the second ring. "Peaceful Meadows, this is Jerry speaking." "Jerry, it's Megan Carter," I said, keeping my voice steady, professional. "I need you to pull up the Morrison service scheduled for Saturday." "Of course, Mrs. Carter. Let me just—" "Yes, here it is. Morrison, Richard. Service at 2 p.m. burial to follow." "Cancel it." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "Cancel the entire service. Refund nothing. Their deposit is forfeit according to our cancellation policy." Jerry's voice dropped to a whisper. "Mrs. Carter, are you certain? The family has already paid $15,000. "I'm aware. That's my family, Jerry. Well, they've made it clear I'm not part of their family anymore. Check the contract. Any cancellation within 72 hours of the service results in complete forfeiture of all deposits and payments. Those are our terms, which they signed." "Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Should I call them myself?" "No, I'll handle the notification. Just process the cancellation in the system. Effective immediately." I hung up and sat there, my heart pounding. The nuclear option. I'd just pulled it. $15,000 represented everything they'd scraped together. My mother worked as a cafeteria manager at the local high school. Bethany was a dental hygienist married to a construction foreman. Marcus delivered packages for FedEx. Dad had left no life insurance, no savings. They probably borrowed money from relatives, maybe even taken out a loan, and I just made it vanish. My phone rang within 20 minutes. Bethany. I declined the call. She called again. Declined. Then Marcus called. Declined. Then a number I didn't recognize, probably my mother. Declined. The text started flooding in. Bethany, what the hell did you do? Bethany, the funeral home just called and said our service is canceled. Bethany, you can't do this. You're insane. Marcus, Megan, this isn't funny. Call me now. Unknown number. Definitely, Mom. How could you do this to your own father? You should be ashamed. I turned off my phone and drove back to my apartment in Marina del Rey. I wasn't getting on that plane. There was no funeral to attend. By the time I got home, I'd received 47 missed calls and 63 text messages. I poured myself a glass of wine, even though it wasn't even 10 a.m., and sat on my balcony overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The view from our apartment was stunning. Sailboats dotting the marina, palm trees swaying in the breeze, people jogging along the beach path with their dogs. This was my life now. A life I built from nothing, despite every obstacle my family had thrown in my way. I thought about the girl I used to be. 17 years old, sitting in guidance counselor Mrs. Patterson's office holding the acceptance letter from UCLA. Full scholarship, a chance to escape. Mrs. Patterson had been thrilled for me. Megan, this is incredible. You should be so proud. I'd gone home that day, acceptance letter clutched in my hand, ready to share the good news. My father was watching TV, beer in hand. My mother was making dinner. Bethany was on the phone with her boyfriend in the corner. I got into UCLA, I'd announced, waving the letter. Full scholarship. The room had gone silent. My father muted the TV. My mother stopped stirring whatever was on the stove. Bethany stayed on the phone in the corner. Marcus, only 10 years old, looked up from his homework with wide eyes. California, my mother finally said, the word dripping with disdain. You want to go all the way to California? It's one of the best schools in the country, Mom, and it's free. The scholarship covers everything. What's wrong with Virginia Commonwealth? My father asked. Your sister went there. It was good enough for her. Bethany went for 2 years and then dropped out, I said. Dad, I want to finish. I want to get my degree. My mother slammed the spoon down on the counter. So we're not good enough for you anymore. That's what you're saying? You think you're too good for your own family? The argument that followed had been vicious. They accused me of being selfish, of abandoning them, of thinking I was better than everyone else. Bethany joined in, saying I was trying to show her up, that I'd always been the favorite, even though that was laughably untrue. Marcus watched from the corner, confused by the sudden hostility, too young to understand what was happening. I left for UCLA that August anyway. My father drove me to the airport in silence. His last words to me before I went through security were, "Don't expect us to bail you out when you fail." No hug, no good luck. Just a prediction of my failure. But I didn't fail. I thrived. I made friends, joined clubs, discovered I was good at marketing and strategy. I worked 3 part-time jobs to cover expenses the scholarship didn't, sent money home when they asked for it, and called every week, even though the conversations were always strained. My sophomore year, I tried to come home for Thanksgiving. I'd saved up for the plane ticket, arranged my work schedule, and looked forward to seeing everyone. 2 days before my flight, my mother called. Actually, Megan, we're doing Thanksgiving at Bethany's new apartment this year. It's small, so we're keeping it immediate family only. I am immediate family, I said, confused. You know what I mean, she replied. Just the people who are actually here, who are part of our daily lives. You made your choice to leave. I spent that Thanksgiving eating ramen noodles in my dorm room while my roommate was with her family in San Diego. I was 19 years old, crying alone on a holiday because my family had decided I wasn't one of them anymore. The pattern continued. I wasn't invited to Bethany's baby shower. I found out about Marcus's high school graduation through Facebook. When my grandmother died during my senior year, nobody told me until after the funeral. We didn't want to interrupt your studies, my mother said when I called, furious and heartbroken. After graduation, I stayed in California. I got a job at a tech startup, worked my way up, met Daniel at a networking event. He was everything my family wasn't. Supportive, kind, genuinely interested in my dreams. When I brought him home to meet everyone 2 years into our relationship, the visit was a disaster. My mother made passive-aggressive comments about his fancy job and our fancy lifestyle. Bethany flirted with him inappropriately, then got angry when he didn't respond. My father barely spoke to him at all. Marcus, by then in his early 20s, was the only one who'd been decent, pulling me aside to say, "He seems really great, Meg. I'm happy for you." Daniel was shocked by their behavior. On the drive back to the airport, he said, "Is it always like that?" That was actually one of the better visits, I told him. Megan, they treat you terribly. You know that, right? I knew, but knowing and accepting were different things. Some part of me kept hoping they'd change, that they'd suddenly realize I was worth loving, that the dysfunction would magically resolve itself. Our wedding was the final proof that things would never change. I invited all of them, of course. Paid for their flights, their hotel rooms, even bought Bethany a new dress because she complained about not having anything appropriate to wear. They came to California, but their presence was poisonous. My mother spent the rehearsal dinner telling anyone who would listen that we were rushing into things even though Daniel and I had been together for 4 years. Bethany got drunk at the reception and made a scene, screaming at her husband about something trivial. My father gave a toast that was supposed to be about me, but somehow turned into a story about Bethany's wedding and how beautiful it had been. The only bright spot was Marcus. He danced with me, told me my dress was beautiful, said he hoped I'd be really happy. For a moment, I glimpsed the brother I remembered from childhood before Mom had poisoned him against me. After the wedding, I tried to maintain contact. Monthly phone calls that went nowhere. Birthday cards they never acknowledged. Christmas gifts that were met with criticism. Too expensive, too cheap, too impersonal, too personal. Nothing was ever right. 3 years ago, I had a miscarriage, 12 weeks pregnant. Devastated, grieving, I called my mother needing comfort. Her response? Well, maybe it's for the best. You and Daniel both work so much. A baby would have been difficult. Daniel held me while I sobbed that night, furious on my behalf. You don't have to keep doing this, he said. You don't have to keep giving them chances to hurt you. But I did, because they were family. Because some stupid, hopeful part of me thought maybe next time would be different. Sitting on my balcony now, watching the sun climb higher over the Pacific, I realized that next time was never going to come. They'd made that clear with Bethany's text. After years of taking my money, my time, my emotional energy, they decided I wasn't even worthy of attending my own father's funeral. Well, if I wasn't family to them, they weren't family to me. And families don't get to use my business for their convenience while simultaneously excluding me from their lives. Daniel was in San Francisco on business, but I called him anyway. Hey, sweetheart, aren't you supposed to be on a plane right now? His voice was warm, concerned. Change of plans. I told him everything. The text from Bethany, my decision to cancel the funeral, the fallout that was undoubtedly brewing. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Do you want me to come home? No, I just needed to hear your voice. Megan, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear me. You don't owe them anything. Not your time, not your money, not your grief, and certainly not your forgiveness. What you did was harsh, yes, but they literally tried to ban you from saying goodbye to your own father. That's cruel beyond measure. I know, but I feel guilty. That's what they trained you to feel. Every time you set a boundary, every time you prioritize yourself, they've conditioned you to believe you're the villain. He sighed. Baby, you're not the villain. You never were. We talked for another hour before he had to go to his meeting. After we hung up, I finally turned my phone back on. The messages had multiplied like rabbits, but there was one that caught my attention, sent from a number I didn't recognize. This is Aunt Linda. I don't know what's happening, but your mother just called me crying about the funeral being canceled. She said you did it out of spite. I don't know the whole story, but that doesn't sound like the Megan I remember. Call me if you need to talk. Aunt Linda, my father's younger sister, the only member of the extended family who'd ever treated me with consistent kindness. She'd moved to Oregon about 15 years ago, and we'd fallen out of touch, but she'd always been different from the rest of them. I called her back. Megan, honey, what's going on? I explained everything, starting with years of being scapegoated and ending with Bethany's text that morning. Aunt Linda listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. I'm going to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago. Your mother has always been jealous of you. When you were younger, you were so bright, so ambitious. You wanted to go to college, make something of yourself. She saw that as a rejection of the life she'd chosen. And your father, he loved you, Megan, but he was weak. He let your mother turn Bethany and Marcus against you because it was easier than standing up to her. I don't understand why she hates me so much. You escaped, that's why. You got out of that small town, built a successful life, married well, became someone. She wanted you to stay and struggle like she did to validate her choices. When you didn't, you became the enemy. Tears streamed down my face. They told me not to come to the funeral, family only, like I'm not even his daughter. That's unforgivable, Megan. What you did with the funeral, I can't say I wouldn't have done the same thing. They pushed you to a breaking point. Actions have consequences, and they're learning that now. Aunt Linda paused, and I could hear her taking a breath. You know what your mother said to me at your high school graduation? She said, Linda, I don't know what to do with Megan. She's so determined to leave us behind. I told her that wasn't what you were doing at all, that you were just pursuing your dreams. But she couldn't hear it. She'd already decided that your success was somehow a rejection of her. I never rejected her. I just wanted a different life. I know, honey, but Margaret, your mother, she took your independence personally. When you were little, you were always so self-sufficient. You'd figure things out on your own, solve your own problems. Bethany was the opposite. She needed constant attention, constant validation. Your mother understood that. She knew how to be needed. But you didn't need her the same way, and she resented it. This was a revelation I hadn't expected. So this has been going on since I was a child. I watched it happen over the years. The way she'd praise Bethany for the smallest things but ignore your achievements. The way she'd make excuses for why she couldn't come to your school events. When you won that scholarship to UCLA, I called her to congratulate her, expecting her to be thrilled. She sounded like someone had died. All she could talk about was how far away California was, how you'd never come back, how you were breaking up the family. Aunt Linda, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you intervene? She sighed heavily. I tried, Megan. After you left for college, I had several conversations with your parents. I told them they were pushing you away, that they needed to be more supportive. Your father would nod and agree, but nothing ever changed. Margaret would get defensive, accuse me of taking sides, say I didn't understand because I never had children of my own. Eventually, I realized I was banging my head against a wall. Marcus was different, though, wasn't he? Yes, when he was younger, Marcus loved you. You were his big sister. He worshipped you, wanted to be like you. But Margaret worked on him, too. Constant little comments about how you'd abandoned the family, how you thought you were too good for them now, how you'd changed. By the time he was in high school, she'd rewritten history in his mind. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture I'd sensed but never fully seen. So none of this was ever really about me. Exactly. And Bethany became her proxy, her ally in this manufactured conflict. Bethany learned early on that aligning with your mother meant getting approval, attention, love. Going against her meant facing her wrath. So she chose the path of least resistance. I'm afraid so. Bethany isn't a bad person, Megan, but she's weak. We talked for another 30 minutes. She told me more stories I'd never heard before. Times my mother had spoken badly about me to relatives. Instances where my father had privately expressed pride in me, but never had the courage to say it to my face. Moments where the family narrative about me had been crafted and reinforced. After hanging up with Aunt Linda, I made myself check the messages. They'd devolved from confusion and anger to outright hostility. Bethany, you're dead to us. Dead. I hope you rot in hell. Marcus, Mom had a panic attack because of you. She's in the ER. Hope you're proud of yourself. A number I now recognized as Mom's. You are not my daughter. Richard would be disgusted by what you've become. You're a selfish, heartless witch. Bethany again. We're going to sue you. You can't do this. It's illegal. There were more. So many more. Distant cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly appeared to tell me what a terrible person I was. Family friends weighed in with their judgment. Even people from my high school, people who barely knew me, felt entitled to send messages about how disappointed they were in me. What struck me was how none of them had the full story. None of them knew about the text banning me from the funeral. None of them knew about years of being excluded, criticized, and emotionally abused. They'd heard my mother's version, poor Margaret, whose cruel daughter canceled her beloved husband's funeral out of spite, and they accepted it without question. I found myself composing responses in my head, explanations, defenses. I wanted to screenshot Bethany's text and send it to everyone. I wanted to write a detailed account of every horrible thing my family had done to me over the years. I wanted to make them understand that I wasn't the villain they thought I was. But then I stopped myself. These people didn't deserve my explanation. They'd rushed to judgment without knowing the facts, which meant they weren't interested in the truth. They just wanted drama. They wanted to participate in the mob mentality that comes with online outrage. There was one message that cut deeper than the others, though. It was from my cousin Jennifer, someone I'd actually been close to as a kid. We'd spent summers together, shared secrets, promised to stay friends forever. Then I'd moved to California, and like everything else, that relationship had withered. Jennifer, Megan, I don't know what's going on with you, but this isn't the person I remember. The Megan I knew was kind and thoughtful. Canceling your dad's funeral, that's cruel beyond words. I hope you get the help you clearly need. The presumption of it stung. Jennifer had no idea who I was anymore. She hadn't bothered to stay in touch, hadn't reached out in over a decade, but somehow she felt qualified to judge my mental health based on my mother's propaganda. I typed out a response. The Megan you knew was the one who kept quiet while being treated like an outsider in her own family. The Megan you knew accepted abuse because she didn't know she had other options. This Megan knows her worth. This Megan has boundaries. If that seems like mental illness to you, maybe you should examine why you think accepting mistreatment is the healthy option. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I deleted it. She wasn't worth it. None of them were. Instead, I blocked everyone who'd sent hostile messages. One by one, I went through the texts, the Facebook messages, the Instagram DMs, and I hit block. It was liberating in a way I hadn't expected. Each block was like closing a door on a room full of toxic gas. My phone, which had been buzzing constantly, fell silent. The only people left unblocked were Aunt Linda, Marcus, and Daniel. Everyone else could exist in whatever reality my mother had constructed for them. I was done trying to manage other people's perceptions of me. I almost laughed at that last one. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the contract they'd signed with Peaceful Meadows. Right there in Section 12, subsection C. Any cancellation requested or processed within 72 hours of scheduled services will result in forfeiture of all deposits, payments, and fees. No refunds will be issued under any circumstances. They'd signed it. Both my mother and Bethany had put their signatures on that document. I pulled up the digital file and examined it closely. There at the bottom of page 4 were their signatures with the date. They'd signed the contract 8 days ago, shortly after Dad died. They'd had plenty of time to read it, to understand the terms, to ask questions if anything was unclear. Jerry had done his job perfectly. The contract included a specific clause requiring the signing parties to initial next to the cancellation policy, acknowledging they'd read and understood it. Both my mother and Bethany had initialed. There was no way they could claim they didn't know about the forfeiture clause. I forwarded the contract to my personal email just to have a backup. Then I made copies of Bethany's text banning me from the funeral. I saved screenshots of the hostile messages I'd received. If this turned into the legal battle, I wanted every piece of evidence organized and ready. But here's what they really didn't know. Peaceful Meadows wasn't the only funeral home in Richmond. There were at least 6 others within a 30-mile radius. They could absolutely still give Dad a funeral. It just wouldn't be at the most prestigious, beautiful cemetery in the region, and it would cost them another chunk of money they probably didn't have. I pulled up the websites of the other funeral homes in the area, curious about pricing. Henderson Family Mortuary offered basic packages starting at around $4,000. Riverside Memorial had similar pricing. They'd been planning an elaborate service at Peaceful Meadows, premium casket, full burial plot, elaborate flower arrangements, catered reception. That's what the $15,000 had covered. But they could do something simpler somewhere else. A basic cremation ran around $2,000. A simple memorial service at a church wouldn't cost much. They had options. The fact that they were having a complete meltdown over losing the Peaceful Meadows booking suggested this wasn't really about being unable to have a funeral at all. It was about losing the prestigious venue, the elaborate service they could brag about, the appearance of having money and status. My father had always cared deeply about appearances. He'd driven a car he couldn't afford, lived in a house that stretched their budget, insisted on name brand everything, even when generic would work fine. My mother was the same way. The thought of having a cheap funeral at a lesser venue was probably more horrifying to them than not having a funeral at all. In a twisted way, I'd hit them where it hurt most. Their pride. That was their problem, not mine. The weekend passed in a strange blur. I didn't attend any funeral because, as far as I knew, they hadn't arranged one. I spent Saturday at the beach with Daniel, who'd caught an early flight home to be with me. We walked along the shore, and I felt the weight of years of family dysfunction starting to lift off my shoulders. "Do you regret it?" Daniel asked as we watched the sunset. "No, I regret that it came to this. I regret that they couldn't just let me grieve my father in peace, but canceling the funeral? No. They needed to learn that I'm not their doormat anymore." On Monday morning, I got a call from a Richmond number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Is this Megan Morrison?" a man's voice asked. Official sounding. "Megan Carter," I corrected. "Yes. This is Detective Marshall with Richmond PD. I'm calling about a complaint filed by a Margaret Morrison. She's alleging theft and fraud related to a funeral service cancellation." My stomach dropped. "Detective, I'm the owner of Peaceful Meadows Cemetery. I canceled the service in accordance with our company's cancellation policy, which was clearly stated in the contract signed by the family. There was no theft or fraud. Can you send me a copy of that contract?" "Of course. I'll have my attorney forward it to you within the hour." "Your attorney?" "Yes, this is a business matter, and given that I'm being accused of a crime, I'll be having our corporate attorney handle all communication." There was a pause. "That's your right, ma'am. Have them contact me at this number." I hung up and immediately called our family attorney, Rebecca, who'd handled all of Daniel's family business for 20 years. She was not amused. "They filed a police report for a contract dispute? That's absurd. Can they actually cause problems for me?" "No, I'll send the detective the contract, and he'll see this as a civil matter at best. More accurately, it's just you exercising your rights as a business owner. This will go nowhere, but it shows how desperate they are." She was right. Detective Marshall called back that afternoon to inform me that no criminal charges would be filed. "Your mother and sister are upset, understandably, but this is clearly a contractual issue. I advise them to consult with a civil attorney if they want to pursue it further. And between you and me, no attorney is going to take this case. The contract is airtight. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Carter." The next bombshell came on Wednesday. Aunt Linda called me, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Megan, I just got off the phone with your mother. They had to have the funeral at Riverside Baptist Church. No burial, just a memorial service. They couldn't afford another funeral home." I closed my eyes. "I see your mother is telling everyone you're a monster," Aunt Linda continued. "She's saying you stole the funeral money, that you're mentally unstable, that you've always been jealous of Bethany. She's painting herself as the victim in all of this." "Of course she is," I said quietly. "That's what she does." There's more. She started a GoFundMe. Help the Morrison family give Richard a proper burial. It's filled with lies about you, Megan. She's saying you embezzled the money, that you cut them off financially, that you abandoned your dying father. It's got about $3,000 in donations so far. My blood ran cold. She's committing fraud. That GoFundMe is based on lies. I reported it to the platform, but I don't know if they'll do anything. Megan, she's destroying your reputation back here. People who don't know the real story are believing her. Let them, I said, though my voice shook. Anyone who matters knows the truth, and anyone who believes her without hearing my side isn't worth worrying about. But it did worry me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining my mother's version of events spreading through my hometown, through extended family, through Dad's friends and coworkers. I was being cast as the villain in a story where I'd actually been the victim for decades. Daniel found me at 2 a.m., sitting in our home office staring at the GoFundMe page. "Don't read the comments," he said gently. Too late. I'd already seen them. Dozens of people I'd never heard of calling me disgusting, heartless, people saying I should be in jail, people who had no idea what my family had put me through for years. "This is defamation," I said. "She's lying about me publicly." "Then we sue her," Daniel said simply. "Rebecca can handle it." "I don't want to drag this out. I just want it to be over." Daniel pulled me close. "Then let it be over. Delete your social media if you need to. Block their numbers. You don't owe them a response or a defense. The people who matter, our friends, our life here, they know who you are." He was right, but it still hurt. I'd spent my whole life trying to prove I wasn't the bad person they claimed I was. And here I was, facing that same accusation on a public platform. The next morning, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I created a burner email account and sent a message to GoFundMe with screenshots of the contract, Bethany's text telling me not to attend the funeral, and a detailed timeline of events. I included Aunt Linda's contact information as a witness to the family's history of excluding me. 3 days later, the GoFundMe was removed for violating their terms of service regarding fraudulent claims. My mother lost the $3,000 that had been donated. Bethany sent me one final text from a new number. "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed this family. Mom's in therapy because of you. Marcus won't speak to any of us. You win, Megan. Congratulations." I blocked the number without responding. Here's what Bethany didn't understand. There was no winning. There was only surviving. I'd survived their emotional abuse, their scapegoating, their attempts to make me feel worthless for having ambitions beyond their small-town limitations, and when they tried to exclude me from my own father's funeral, I'd finally fought back in the only way that would actually make them feel the consequences of their cruelty. Did I feel guilty? Sometimes in the quiet moments, I'd think about Dad, about the funeral that didn't happen the way they planned, about the fact that he was buried eventually in a far less beautiful cemetery than peaceful Meadows. But then I'd remember that he'd allowed this dysfunction to flourish. He'd stood by while Mom poisoned Bethany and Marcus against me. He'd never once defended me, never once told them to leave me alone. Aunt Linda remained in contact. She told me that the family had essentially imploded after everything that happened. Marcus had apparently had enough of Mom's manipulation and moved to North Carolina with his wife and kids. He'd reached out to Aunt Linda to get my number, but she wanted to check with me first before giving it to him. "Do you want to talk to him?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe someday, but not now. I need time." That's fair, honey. You take all the time you need." Months passed. The holidays came and went, without a single message from my mother or Bethany. I heard through Aunt Linda that Mom had moved in with Bethany after losing her apartment. Apparently, she'd taken out loans to pay for Dad's funeral and couldn't keep up with the payments. Bethany's marriage was reportedly strained from the stress of having her mother living with them. I felt the twinge of something that might have been sympathy, but it was quickly replaced by the memory of those words. "Family only. You're not welcome." In February, almost 6 months after Dad's death, I got a letter in the mail, my mother's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Inside was a single page, her shaky cursive covering both sides. "Megan, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve to ask, but I need you to know that I see now how wrong I was. Therapy has helped me understand that I took out my own disappointments and regrets on you. You were always so independent, so strong, and instead of being proud, I felt threatened. I convinced myself that you looked down on us, that you thought you were better than your family. The truth is, I was afraid you'd leave and never come back, so I pushed you away first, believing that would hurt less. It didn't. What I did with the funeral was unforgivable. Bethany was following my lead, as she always has. I've lost you. I've lost Marcus, and I'm living with the consequences of the poison I spread. I don't expect a response to this letter. I just wanted you to know that you weren't crazy. You weren't the problem. I was. Your father did love you, Megan. He told me before he died that his biggest regret was not standing up for you more. He was proud of what you built, even if he never said it to your face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Mom! I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and haven't looked at it since. Did it change anything? I don't know. An apology doesn't erase decades of damage. It doesn't undo the funeral I wasn't allowed to attend, or the $15,000 I made disappear, or the family that tore itself apart. But it did give me something I hadn't expected. Closure. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but an acknowledgement that I hadn't been imagining things all those years. The gaslighting, the scapegoating, the cruelty. It had all been real, and it hadn't been my fault. Daniel asked me once if I'd do it differently, if I could go back to that morning in the gas station parking lot. No, I said without hesitation. They needed to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people like garbage and expect them to just accept it. I spent 23 years being their emotional punching bag. That text about not being welcome at the funeral, that was the final straw. Do you think you'll ever speak to them again? Maybe Marcus, if he reaches out and shows me he's different from who he was. But my mother and Bethany? I don't think so. Some relationships are too broken to fix. A year has passed now since Dad died. I still think about that day sometimes, about the choice I made to cancel the funeral. People have told me it was vindictive, that I went too far, that I should have been the bigger person. But here's what I've learned. Being the bigger person for decades only taught my family that they could mistreat me without consequences. It enabled their abuse and made me complicit in my own suffering. By fighting back, by taking something they valued as much as they'd taken my dignity and belonging, I finally showed them that I wasn't a doormat. Was it harsh? Absolutely. Was it justified? I believe it was. They literally told me I wasn't family anymore, so I stopped treating them like family. The $15,000 is long gone, absorbed into the business accounts of peaceful Meadows. Dad was eventually buried in a modest cemetery across town. The family scattered to different states, and I'm still here in California, living my life free from their toxicity. Sometimes people ask if I have regrets. I do. I regret that it took me so long to stand up for myself. I regret the years I wasted trying to earn love from people who were determined to withhold it. I regret that my father died without us ever having a real, honest conversation about everything that had happened. But canceling that funeral? No regrets at all. It was the most empowering thing I've ever done. The moment I finally chose myself over people who'd spent decades choosing to hurt me. They say funerals are for the living, not the dead. Well, that funeral, or lack thereof, certainly was for the living. It was the funeral of a dysfunctional family dynamic. The burial of my role as the scapegoat. The final goodbye to people who never truly saw me as one of them anyway. Family only, Bethany had texted. She was right about one thing. It was family only. And they'd made it clear years ago that I wasn't really family in any way that mattered. I just finally accepted it and acted accordingly. My real family is Daniel, his parents, who embraced me with genuine love, the friends I've made here who actually value me, and Aunt Linda, who saw through the dysfunction all along. Those are the people who showed up for me when it mattered. The Morrisons back in Virginia, they're just people I used to know. People who taught me the hard way that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away and never look back. And that $15,000? Consider it payment for 23 years of therapy.